So, good morning to everyone. My discussion for this morning is about how stress influences the immune response. The researcher for this journal is David A. Padgett and Ronald Glaser. It published on Trend in Immunology on August 2003. My outline for this journal is HPA axis and glucocorticoid hormones. Second, the mechanism of action for GC hormones. Third, sympathetic nervous system, adrenal medulla, and catecholamines. And fourth, mechanism of action for catecholamine. And the last one is the conclusion. So, let's start in what is stress. Stress is simply a reaction to a stimulus that disturbs our physical and mental equilibrium. According to Hansel, stress is the physiological response of the body to external stressor. Stressors is a chemical or biological agent, environmental conditions, external stimulus, or an event that causes stress to an organism. This stressor can be real, imagined, internal, or external. In internal, the example is the expectation, demands, misperception, assumptions, and fear or anger. In the external, the example is the death, illness, relationship, breakdown, being victim of a crime, or retirement. So, psychoneuroimmunology or PNI is a discipline that studies stress-associated immune dysregulation. This field, it focuses on the interaction among the central nervous system, endocrine, and immune system. This three modulation of immune response by the central nervous system is mediated by a complex network of signals that function in bidirectional communication among the nervous, endocrine, and immune system. So, I have two major pathways, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal and the sympathetic adrenal medullary axis. Lymphocytes, monocytes or macrophages, and granulocytes exhibit receptors for many neuroendocrine products of the HPA and some axis. It is the cortisol and catecholamines. These two can cause changes in cellular trafficking, proliferation, cytokine secretion, antibody production, and cytolytic activity. Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal or HPA is a complex set of direct influences and feedback interaction among the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland. The hypothalamus receives and monitors information about the environment and coordinates responses through nerves and hormones. Visual information, smells, hearing, temperature, sensation, and pain alert the hypothalamus to emergencies or environmental hazards. The emotional portions of the brain also relay information to the hypothalamus. From this integrative center, the brain controls hormone secretion from the pituitary gland and other tissues, such as the adrenal glands. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland are located just above the brainstem, while the adrenal glands are found on the top of the kidneys. So, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal or HPA axis responds to a stress stimulus in routed to the hypophysiotropic neurons in the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus. These neurosecretory cells release corticotropin-releasing hormone or CRH and arginine vasopressin, which travel through the median eminence and hypophyseal portal vessels. Once CRH reaches the anterior pituitary, it binds CRF type 1 receptors of pituitary corticotropic cells. Adrenocorticotropic hormone is released into circulation, binds its receptor in the zonal fasciculata of adrenal cortex, and causes release of glucocorticoids in circulation act on target cardiovascular tissues including the heart, the vasculature, adipose tissue, and muscles, then feed back to the level of the central nervous system to inhibit activation the HPA axis. So, the mechanism of action for GC hormones or glucocorticoids is diffused across the cell membrane where they bind with GC receptors in the cytoplasm. Upon binding of the GC, this causes release of inhibitor proteins such as heat shock protein from 90 heat, allowing the GC-bound GR to diffuse across the nuclear membrane where it binds to the glucocorticoid response element. The GRE is responsible for transcribing anti-inflammatory proteins. Additionally, binding of GC to GR result in recruitment of histone deacetylase, which is responsible for GR, permitting its binding to nuclear factor kappa B and activating protein 1. Upon binding, these transcription factors are deactivated, thereby inhibiting the transcription of pro-inflammatory proteins. Additionally, the HDAC2, the histone permitting transcription of anti-inflammatory genes by GR. So the sympathetic nervous system, adrenal medulla, and catecholamines as the stress response is triggered and body sympathetic nervous system is activated. The adrenal glands release stress hormones like cortisol, while the sympathetic adrenomedullary axis is also triggered to release catecholamines. These circulate through the bloodstream and the brain. The sympathetic nervous system coordinates the body automatic fight-to-fight response by stimulating the adrenal medulla to secrete catecholamines and by directly stimulating cardiac output and blood flow to muscle while diverting blood flow away from the visceral organs. In catecholamines, it regulates regulation of immune function by glucocorticoid hormones associated with stress, modulate a large immune function including cell proliferation, cytokine and antibody production, cytolytic activity, and cell trafficking, often act in concert with activation of the HPA axis. Catecholamines are epinephrine or adrenaline, norepinephrine or noradrenaline, and dopamine release of the hormones epinephrine and norepinephrine from the adrenal medulla of the adrenal glands is part of the fight or fight response. Mechanism of action for catecholamines is mediate their effect on target tissue through adrenergic receptors and numerous cells of the immune system, including lymphocytes and macrophage, express adrenoceptors. Adrenergic receptors bind epinephrine and norepinephrine and activate the calm response element binding protein, including the transcription of genes encoding for a variety of cytokines. These are G proteins coupled receptor that can be divided into two subgroups. This is the alpha adrenergic receptors and B adrenergic receptors. It appears that the most important receptor for the immune system is the B2 adrenergic receptors. So for the conclusion, the data continue to generated and are providing more insight on the mechanism to help understand interplay among these three body systems. It is now widely accepted that stressful life event can impact the health of the individual, including immunological health. Although there are many specific details yet to be delineated, it is becoming increasingly clear that products of the endocrine system, GC hormones, and products of the nervous system such as catecholamines can alter the functions of macrophages and lymphocytes as well as other cells of the immune system. For the review of stress, first, when the stress occurs, the systematic nervous system is triggered. Secondly, the norepinephrine is released by nerves and epinephrine is released by the adrenal medulla. By activating receptors in blood vessel and other structures, these substances ready the heart and working muscle for actions. And acetylcholine is released in the parasympathetic calming effect nervous system producing. The neuroendocrine system also maintains the body normal internal functioning. Corticotropin releasing hormones is released from hypothalamus and travel to the pituitary gland where it triggers the release of adrenocorticotropic hormone. The ACTH travels in the blood to the adrenal glands where it stimulates the release glucocorticoid hormone and cortisol. That's all. Thank you.
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked or having arguments at home, can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions, right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease. The effects of stress may filter right down to your brain's DNA. An experiment showed that the amount of nurturing a mother rat provides its newborn baby plays a part in determining how that baby responds to stress later in life. The pups of nurturing moms turned out less sensitive to stress because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which stick to cortisol and dampen the stress response. The pups of negligent moms had the opposite outcome, and so became more sensitive to stress throughout life. These are considered epigenetic changes, meaning that they affect which genes are expressed without directly changing the genetic code. And these changes can be reversed if the moms are swapped. But there's a surprising result. The epigenetic changes caused by one single mother rat were passed down to many generations of rats after her. In other words, the results of these actions were inheritable. It's not all bad news though. There are many ways to reverse what cortisol does to your stressed brain. The most powerful weapons are exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware and focused on your surroundings. Both of these activities decrease your stress and increase the size of the hippocampus, thereby improving your memory. So don't feel defeated by the pressures of daily life. Get in control of your stress before it takes control of you.